their families get paid. Okay.
So Janet, just so you know, we typically give folks 1 or 2 more minutes, but we do have a full agenda, and we want to get folks who are already here to hear from Mr. Lawson. So I would get like 4:02, and then as people join in, Colleen will admit. But Alona, I think we interrupted you with the recording notice. You're good? Okay. I will say, not to make this too partisan, but although we never ran the ad, we still might do that, but we put together an ad that basically said, let's see, DeSantis, Ryan, George W. Bush, the list is long, Trump, of Republicans who have thirsted after cutting Social Security.
Oh, yes, Wall Street wants money.
This is not something new. This is something that's been going on for, I don't know. I mean, it depends on when you want to look at it, but in some cases, I would
about
say
34,
it's about 1935, right? In various ways. So,
Janet, you can go ahead and start with your.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Democrats Abroad speakers event. My name is Janet Payne, and I am the new chair of Democrats Abroad. And our speaker this afternoon is Mr. Alex Lawson, and he is with the group Social Security Works, and he's executive director. And there's a slide on the screen that tells you a little bit more about what he has done. He's working with the Strengthened Social Security Coalition, and they work to fight and protect Social Security. And the topics today will be Social Security facts and history. And then when Republicans say that cuts are off the table, are they really? And then we're going to end up with what you can do and some questions for Mr. Lawson. So without any further ado, we'll go to Mr. Lawson. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Really great to be speaking with you. I've always enjoyed speaking with you. It's a good day for talking too. It's bananas here in Washington, D.C. So whatever you're reading in the press, it's way stupider than that. And it's also extremely chaotic and dangerous right now for Social Security, for Medicare, for all of us. And I think I'll do a little bit of a sort of state of play. And I don't want anyone to think that it's too gloomy, but we've got a lot to fight. I think I'm supposed to do a facts about Social Security as the first bullet. So I'll just say Social Security is awesome, works. The only problem with Social Security is that these billionaires keep trying to rob it from us, and that the benefits are too low for millions of Americans. Which we can easily fix by just having millionaires and billionaires pay the same rate as all the rest of us into Social Security. And then we can expand benefits for everybody and insolvency into the next century. The only people who have a plan for Social Security are the Democrats. So Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, they have a bill. It increased Social Security $200 for everybody. It pays for that by just getting rich people, ultra rich, to pay into the system on all of their income, earned and unearned. So that across the board benefit increase and targeted increase and pushes solvency into the next century. But still, NPR yesterday or Friday, recently, I think Friday, put out a story and they said, Social Security going bankrupt, and this is the man who's going to save it. And it was Senator Bill Cassidy, who's the ranking member of the Help Committee in opposition to Bernie Sanders. He's the Republican whose literal plan is worse than if we do nothing. So if Congress does nothing in 2033, we have a decade. If Congress does nothing, benefits go down to match how much money is coming in, because Social Security cannot borrow any money. So outflow always matches inflow. And the projections are made every year. That date moves back and forth by a year. But generally, we have 1 decade to get millionaires and billionaires to pay into Social Security the same as the rest of us. And then we push solvency into the next decade, or we expand benefits. The other option, Bill Cassidy's option, is that we cut benefits right now. So if we don't do anything, benefits fall around 19-20%. Bill Cassidy's plan is to cut benefits today by 23%. He does it through a variety of mechanisms. And his bill isn't even like real. It's not even introduced. But there's NPR touting him as the guy who has a plan to save Social Security, which means, you know, his office contacted them and was pitching him and got this story placed. It's not like NPR just magically came up with this. And let me tell you why. Because what he's trying to do is position himself and the Republicans as if they are the sensible voice on Social Security, and the Democrats are the ones who aren't doing anything. And he's been trying to push this compromise, which is just his plan to cut Social Security throughout the entirety of the debt ceiling. So what this has to do with the debt ceiling is Social Security is wildly popular. You know, and it's not just the Democrats abroad who love it. The Democrats here love it. It's not just the Democrats who love it. It's Republicans love it. Independents love it. I've done polling to show no matter how you cut up the demographics, everybody loves Social Security, except for a very small number of billionaires who hate it with everything that they've got and won't stop until they rob it from us. And the only way they can do that is by using some process outside of the regular order, because cuts to Social Security will never be able to get through regular order because it's super unpopular to come and rob people of their Social Security. So they try to use something like the debt ceiling to force through these very unpopular cuts. Now, this looks very similar to like what has happened in France with Macron, and he's raised the retirement age. Raising the retirement age is just a benefit cut. And the way he did it was above Parliament, right? He went outside of Parliament to push this through. Very similar setup here. So then we start pointing out that that's exactly what the Republicans are going to do. It's what they said they were going to do. They ran on it. And they actually got clobbered from the perspective of like what could have happened or should have happened in this setup, right? They got a 4-person majority in the House. If you think about the last time the political bloodbath in the midterms after Obama was elected, you sort of see the two different setups there. And so the Republicans running on this, hey, we're going to rob you of your Social Security, did not do well in the elections. And so then they just started lying and were like, no, we definitely didn't want to cut your benefits. And to believe that, you literally have to, and Terry, I don't remember if it was before we were on with everybody or after, but Terry was asking, you know, do we believe them or not? And you don't have to, you just have to like know that the internet exists and Google them and what they said and ran on, right? So it's not like anyone's making this up. They just would have you believe that no one knows how to use the internet and, you know, watch the tape of them. So I won't go through that this is their only plan. But then we did create a situation where they were on very politically unpopular ground. So what the setup is there are 3 options now that have been laid out. So one option is the Republicans get the McCarthy budget, what McCarthy put out to solve the debt ceiling. We call it the Default on America Act, or DOA. And that would include a 22% cut in discretionary spending, which includes the Social Security Administration. So I think everyone gets it, but just to spell it out, you can't cut 1% from an already underfunded organization that administers the Social Security for everybody in this country. 10,000 baby boomers are retiring a month. 10,000 baby boomers a month. So you can't cut 1% from SSA. SSA is creaking under its own weight and budget cuts. They've been trying to starve the administration forever. If this was a room full of people, I would ask now, like, who's ever had to call Social Security? How was that wait time? Right? Everybody knows it's a disaster already. Offices are closed. They have shortened hours. It's very difficult to get your appointments. If you were to cut 1%, it would catastrophic across the system. They proposed a 22% benefit funding cut. That means that the Social Security Administration would cease to exist. You can't take a quarter of the budget away from something and pretend that it would still work. Same thing with the VA, a quarter. It took a quarter of it. So that's one thing that they're saying, okay, that's our offer. If they don't raise the debt ceiling, what happens is the U.S. defaults on its obligations, on its debt for the first time in history. And we don't know what that means. But the Treasury Secretary, Yellen, said Social Security checks won't go out. She's the one who sends the checks. So we don't know what would happen if the U.S. didn't pay its obligations, because it's never happened before, because it's preposterous to even imagine that we wouldn't pay the money that we owe, that has already been spent, because America is the richest country in the world. In fact, in many respects, the richest country in the history of the world. This is not about our ability to pay. It's about a political attack on Biden. So what we have is a hostage taking, not a negotiation. The hostage is the world economy, and they're holding it ransom to demand cuts to our Social Security system that would definitely, especially you all, I'm not trying to be like, try to scare you. I just want to be honest. Like, whatever cuts to SSA happen, they're going to affect you all more, because, you know, I don't know, unless you have a broad Social Security office near you, you're going to rely on the Social Security Administration to be able to access information about your benefits, et cetera, et cetera. That's already very difficult, and any cuts are going to disproportionately impact. I don't know. Do you call yourselves expats? I don't know if that's a term that is not a good one, but it's going to affect people who receive their Social Security benefits in other countries, which is a large amount. It's a huge question. There's a lot of I won't go down that road. Just if you are interested in it, you can see there's each country, there's bilateral agreements with countries, between countries, about how we deal with how how they deal with Social Security. Sort of secondary to this, I'm just pointing out that the cuts would hurt you disproportionately because you don't have access to a physical office very easily. Or the world economy blows up. So like that your Social Security deposit would not come in June is definitely one of the things that might happen. I would say it's highly likely that veterans payments, Social Security payments, other federal payments would not be deposited into accounts if we breach the debt ceiling. But in many ways, that would also be like the least effect. It would be staggering for all of us who are expecting, you know, things to just keep functioning on the way that we earned things. But the global economy would also crash. We don't know what it would look like, but the U.S. defaulting on its debt is more than just the U.S. defaulting on its debt. The U.S. dollar is the reserve currency for the entire world. So the entire banking system is built on U.S. Treasury bonds. At the bottom of every bank, at the bottom are U.S. Treasury bonds because they are the safest instruments in the world. And this is a little fun. I don't actually know how much time I have, so someone should tell me to be quiet when I should, or remind me in the chat of how long. And I want to get to Q&A, and I don't want to scare anybody. I want to lay out what's actually happening. The last time this happened under Obama, remember there was the brinkmanship over the debt ceiling, and it was really interesting what happened. Just to point out the weirdness of what and why I keep saying we don't know. S&P, one of the three ratings agencies, they downgraded U.S. sovereign debt from AAA to AA plus, AA plus, and so it's down 1 point. And the reaction to that, so it said, what that means is the ratings agency was saying U.S. Treasury bonds are riskier now than they were previously. That's why they downgraded the ratings, right? But what happened, because the US is the reserve currency of the world, is that created system-wide globally a bunch of risk. And when that happens, there's a response called flight from risk or flight to safety, right? A lot of it is actually automated. It's algorithms. And what this is, if I was speaking to a room full of people, I would ask the question, and usually people know the answer. Where does capital fly to in the face of risk? So U.S. Treasury bonds were downgraded. All this money is worried that it's going to get lost. So it flows into U.S. Treasury bonds because they are the safest instrument in the world. So if you can picture how that's a paradox, right? The downgrade of U.S. debt is what kicked it off, but the end result was all this money flowed into U.S. Treasury bonds. So we really don't know what U.S. default would specifically look like. We do know that it would be an economic catastrophe. So Social Security checks not going out, but also any savings, you know, if there's anything in a 401k or anything like that, you're going to see massive evaporation of wealth. It really is an economic calamity, cataclysm. I don't think you can have a word that's too big. And it's entirely made up. That's the amazing part. Because the third option, remember, one, cut 25% of the budget of Social Security office. This is what the Republicans proposed. And then people have incredible difficulty getting their benefits, offices closed. It's just a destruction of the administration, Social Security Administration's Veterans Affairs. That's what the Republicans propose. They're holding hostage. They're saying, okay, well, if you don't give us those cuts, we're going to default on U.S. obligations and kick off this financial apocalypse. And the third option is just that they raise the debt ceiling, which they do with regularity, every time it came up under Donald Trump, they just raised the debt ceiling. They just can do it. It is there's no reason for them to not raise it other than to extract cuts from the Democrats. And that's the setup of where we are. And really, it's this week that most of the decisions are going to be made. CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, came out last week saying that the X date, the date at which we actually breach the debt ceiling, is the first week of June. But then they also noted that Treasury might not be able to meet an obligation at any point now in May. So the first time the US doesn't pay one of its bills, that's default. And the markets will react. So we're in the absolute danger zone right now, which is what's pushing. And this happened over the weekend. You're seeing a lot of reporting on it today, which is what's pushing people to come to some sort of deal. But the truth is that the only deal that should be reached is a clean debt ceiling raise. That's just what they need to do. And then if they want to fight for these catastrophic cuts, they can try doing it through the appropriations process. That's where you fight for your budget. You don't hold the world economy hostage. So I hope maybe I'll do a mid-pause for any questions on that particular stuff. Oh, I see. There's the questions. Raise your hand.
Alona, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, first of all, Alex, I've followed you for a long time. I'm on the board here with our chapter in Mexico, and I just want to say all of Mexico is listening to you. So thank you so much for appearing on our program. The other is most of the retirees here don't have this problem, but those of us who have worked abroad for most of our lives, and yet we also have Social Security that we've accrued, we're very much impacted by the Windfall Elimination Act. I know that there was a repeal started on this. For those who don't know what it means that they basically don't give you your Social Security, even though you earned it, because the pension plans are considered to be foreign. I mean, they are foreign. Mine is foreign. But why that should have anything to do with the U.S. pension is the concern. Do you have any updates on that? Do you know what the situation will be? I mean, we shouldn't be counting foreign and U.S. as if they're one bundle.
Yeah. So I definitely will talk WebGPO. I might put it to the end of this discussion just so that we can do debt ceiling first. Also, though, I will just tell you that there's no movement on WebGPO because the nothing is going to happen until the debt ceiling is done. There's a 0% chance of like movement of anything. It's not I don't know why, but everyone decided to do everything this week. So like Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal are introducing Medicare for all this week. And it is a very weird week to try to get anything besides the debt ceiling focused on. So WebGPO continues to be a priority, but it's like all things legislation have just been hit pause for a minute, which is another problem with this fight, right? Like this is because everybody knows what's going to happen right after, if we can actually get through it without ending up in Mad Max, is they're going to be like, oh, well, now we can't do it because we're into campaigning. Right. So there's always that really thin window where you can actually get something done. And we're going to burn up all the time on this fight. Sorry, I said I'd put the WebGPO to the end. I'll just finish the answer. My general take on WebGPO is that a lot of the bills that have, bipartisan support and they're not moving and they don't have a plan to move. The Republicans will never have a plan to move those. We support just eliminating WebGPO. I continue to believe that the best likelihood of eliminating WebGPO is going to be in a larger Social Security reform package. where we actually end up passing something in the House, something in the Senate, conference them together, and that is a ways off. So that is not going to happen soon.
Thanks, Alex. We have a question from Dan.
Hello, Alex. My question is, how can you explain in detail the difference between someone who makes less than $100,000 a year and the Social Security that they pay in, as to someone that makes $1 million a year, and how much they pay in, and how is it that the billionaires are they don't have to pay their share?
So let me drop a link into the chat here, and I'm going to change your hypothetical slightly so that it's 100,000 and 160,000, sorry, and then 1.6 million. Wait, did that work? That link looks very ugly. I'm not positive if that worked, but that's called the max tax. So people don't pay in on 100% of their income if they make over the max amount, which is $160,000 right now, right? So if you make $160,000, you're paying 12.6% on all of your income, right? So like 100% of your income's got that 12.6% on it. Now, every dollar after that, you pay 0 into Social Security. So you only pay on that 160,000. So instead of paying on 100%, right, 1.6 million is going to pay on 10%. Keep going up, and you'll see that the richer you are, the less you pay into Social Security. Or you can think of it in time too. Most people who make under $160,000, which is the majority of wage earners, they pay into Social Security all year long, right? So all year long, they're paying in. A person who makes $1 million a year, they stop paying in right around February 14th every single year. And then after that point, they don't pay in on anything more. And then if you have somebody who's making oodles of money, and Elon Musk or something, they will stop paying, even though most of his money is not in wages. And that's another factor that, when I keep saying on all of their income, we want to capture the unearned income as well. But someone like Elon Musk is going to stop paying in like the first second of January 1st every single year. And so just sort of writ large, if you step back and look at it, what you see is that the funding structure of Social Security is incredibly regressive, right? The more you make, the less you pay into Social Security as a percentage of your income. The benefit structure is incredibly progressive, meaning that the less you make, the more the benefits replace your income. So it's a curve that flattens off at the top. And because of that nature, the benefits being so progressive, Social Security becomes this enormous engine against inequality. When they try to scare people, they say it's redistributive. It is redistributive, but they just don't like that it redistributes from the ultra wealthy to the not ultra wealthy, instead of the other way, which is what we've got right now, where billionaires actually have an upward redistribution of wealth into their pockets through a variety of policy means, like paying, poverty wages at Walmart, and then giving flyers out saying this is how you collect public benefits. So in effect, the richest family in the world, the Walton family, not in effect, it's just right there on its face. Our tax dollars are just subsidizing them because they're paying starvation wages and the taxpayer is making up the rest. If we just make the revenue side progressive as well, then you have both the revenue and the benefit side being progressive. The engine against inequality that Social Security is even larger. And, you know, it wasn't a long time ago, it actually ended with Reagan, but like Eisenhower, not a Democrat, that dude, top on his list, you can read it, fighting inequality was a top thing. So he was a, you know, red-blooded capitalist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he understood the corrosive nature of inequality is what leads to system failure, and the fall of democracy and the rise of tyranny. So as a policy goal, to narrow the gap between the ultra wealthy and everyone else, what used to be a bipartisan concern, and, you know, Social Security used to be a bipartisan concern. We're in a very different moment now, though, and I do think you're not seeing like some sort of fever break with the Republicans. They're literally holding the world economy hostage to demand these cuts right now. So Dan, that went a bit far afield, but the very short answer is people only pay into Social Security up to $160,000 of wages right now. And on every dollar after that, they don't pay in. Usually what we do is create a small donut hole. So like in Bernie and Warren's bill, we start at 250,000. So the dollars between 160 and 250, we don't hit them. And then we start at 250 and go all the way up to Elon Musk, and have them pay in.
Alex, we've got a question from Daniel Stein who says, what effect might this have on interest rates, which have been rising to counter inflation?
The this there, is that default?
I'm assuming so.
Yeah, it's really difficult to say because you're talking about, you know, what the interest rates going up did is made dollars way more expensive. They're not like historically expensive now, but the rate between zero and where we are now was very fast to raise that. It's very unclear what the actual effect would be, but it would be like sort of secondary, right? So I say this, and it is in jest, and I always want to make sure. But I call it Mad Max, right? Like I'm literally saying, like, you know, get your chainsaws and your hockey mask because the world economic order collapsing is going to be something that we've never seen before. The short answer to your question, Daniel, is it'd be massively deflationary. If there's a default, it's going to be so deflationary that we're looking at something like depression level and possibly greater, because it would be like the reserve. The reserve currency does change as global empires, or right, like change. The Dutch used to have the guilder was the reserve currency. Then the UK had it. The pound was the reserve currency. So it does change, but it usually changes over the course of decades, if not centuries. And to blow up the reserve currency in like one day, the effect would be massively deflationary.
Thanks, Alex. There's a question from Marcia next. Marcia, you want to go ahead? You have to unmute.
Yeah, I did.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I moved a small amount of money down from my US account down into my Mexico account today. And it was just, you know, about 17 was what the exchange. It's probably showing higher than that officially, but that's what bank to bank they were giving me. Is this uncertainty affecting the exchange rate of the dollar worldwide? And if they reach an agreement and raise the debt ceiling without any of the other stuff that you were talking about, will that improve where the dollar is?
Haha. These are all just I am not a financial expert, but I'm happy to just tell you what like based on my understanding. I'm just telling you, don't make financial decisions based on it. Check it with other people. The only financial advice that I'll always give you is if your financial advisor tells you not to count on Social Security being there for you, fire them and get a new one, because they're liars. Like Social Security is definitely the most gonna be there for you thing that there is, right? Which is why the idea that Social Security benefits might not be paid is so preposterous. But it is possible that the US political system inflicts this self-inflicted wound. So you asked two things. One of them, economic calamity. It's really weird. The reason I brought up that thing where they downgraded and then the money went into the
Sure.
dollar, it's really weird to try to guess what would happen if the economic order sort of went boom in one. The guess, you can read a bunch in a going all ways, but in the short term, probably there'd be a rush to safety, which is the US. The dollar would probably get stronger in the short term, but then you're in the massive depression. So the uncertainty right now is definitely affecting exchange rates, but I don't know like in what way. There definitely should be pushing down the uncertainty as we get closer to the X date. And the dollar should be weakening, but there are other things going on. So I'm not going to like predict. There's a bunch in Barron's that you can read that's actually kind of interesting stuff about like what happens if they then raise the debt ceiling. There's going to be this like whipsaw thing that'll happen because the bond markets have already really priced this in. So credit default swaps, which is how rich people insure their money, capital. Unless you're a billionaire on the phone, you don't get to buy those really. But credit default swaps right now are selling like, drugs and cigarettes to billionaires. So the bond market is pricing in a real possibility of default. And so if that doesn't happen, there will be like a big rebound, right? Like all the shorts will lose. And again, I think long term, any sort of clean debt ceiling raise is going to be the absolute best case scenario. And then from a clean debt ceiling raise to Mad Max is sort of what you get. I will also say there's one other thing that is being talked about, two other things that are being talked about that are sort of possible. One is a commission, which we hate commissions that have the force of law that are created above Congress, which are called fast track commissions, because they'll give it a mandate to find cuts and then it'll be an up or down vote. It's outside of regular order. That's a really, really dangerous thing for Social Security, Medicare, and all of our other benefits. There's a commission could also not have the force of law, so that we don't want any commission, but if there was one, we don't want it to have force of law. Another thing is they could have a short-term extension of the debt ceiling to September that would just align it with the budget process, and it would have appropriations and budget be happening side by side with the debt ceiling. That's like kicking the can down the road, but you can see some places where that actually could be a scenario where everyone thinks everyone can say they won something because the debt ceiling got raised and the cuts aren't on the debt ceiling, they're happening in the appropriations. And I guess I should just say what's being reported, but never believe the reporting on Monday. It's just, this is when everyone's telling their yarns, right? So like unless you see specific quotes from people, we're in the middle of a negotiation, or, a hostage taking, but there is this sort of thing that's being discussed right now in DC, which is work requirements on SNAP and TANF, budget caps at the 2022, right? So the budget of 2022 for 2 years, which is a massive discretionary cut. That would really hurt Social Security. It's smaller than the 22% cut, so I don't think it motivates the right wing in McCarthy's caucus, though. So, sorry, this is what we do all day in DC. The deal that everyone is talking about, if you put it on a board, you still don't see how it can get all the votes that are needed to get something actually done, but it is being talked about. So I'll recite it for you. The budget caps 2022 for 2 years, unspent COVID money, permitting reform, which is basically Joe Manchin's blow the mountaintops off of West Virginia mountains. It's this really dirty, it's actually part of the permitting reform. There's like fine stuff in, but the one that Manchin is leading on has all sorts of absolutely noxious giveaways. So that is being discussed, and that the work requirements on TANF, and which is temporary aid for needy families, food stamps, basically, SNAP and TANF. The House Democrats have already rejected work requirements for all federal programs. So it's like they are negotiating like something, but when you do watch it, the I don't know how much process you want. You all seem like you kind of like process, so I will say, have you all heard, you know what discharge petition is? So the power that Kevin McCarthy wields as the speaker is he gets to say what gets a vote. He brings it to the floor, and he can personally not bring something to the floor. Even if every single other person in the caucus said, hey, I want to, pass this bill to paint this fence red, he could just not bring that bill to the floor. So there's this process that's built in called the discharge petition. And it's this really arcane process. It's like tailor-made for fans of the West Wing. It is real. And what it does is it forces a bill onto the calendar over the speaker, or it doesn't involve the speaker at all. And the Democrats set up a discharge petition on the first day of this Congress, because everything in DC is made up, including the words they describe it as. The bill ripens today. So the bill is now ripened. And what that means is they can put a deal into the discharge petition and then pass that out of the House, even if the speaker said no. It would still need 60 votes in the Senate, though, right? So you would have to see a situation where the four corners, which is the Republican and Democrat in the House and the Republican and Democrat in the Senate, where they all agree, and like McCarthy signs off on this deal. They use the discharge petition, but here's the rub. You still need to get to 218 votes to get that across, right? So you still need to pass it. So generally you're like, okay, well, there's two things. It could either be you lose from the right and you lose from the left, and you pass it with like some bulk of Republicans and Democrats that are in the so-called middle, right? That doesn't really exist because there's 7 axes in the Republican caucus. Or the other way, which is the only one that I think might work, is all the Democrats and some of the moderate Republicans joining the Democrats. But anything that would set up that one, you couldn't get 10 Republicans to vote for in the Senate. So you really are, and Biden really is, in a very difficult situation, which again is why the bond market is pricing in the real possibility of U.S. default.
Alex, I've got two
That
more.
was a lot. I know. I apologize. That was a lot.
That's okay. We're getting educated here. So I've got 2 more questions, and then maybe we can move to what can regular citizens do. So here's
Yep.
Nancy. Nancy, you want to unmute and ask?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Alex. Thank you for coming. I'm wondering how much Social Security would benefit from eliminating the wage cap, the wage cap that we now have on it at 168 or whatever you said, $1,000 a year. If you just eliminated that without changing the definition of income, how many years would be added to the liquidity of Social Security just by that one change? You have a feel for that?
Yeah, it changes. I don't love the question because I don't think that if we're going to raise the cap, we should think about it as like excluding bringing in other forms of income, because the wealthy have created this huge tax avoidance system, massive tax avoidance system since the setup of Social Security. So if we are going to eliminate the cap, I believe very strongly that we also need to incorporate all income, because the leakage out of the system is a big problem of it. And so if you eliminate the cap and include all income, then you can, that's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren's revenue, and you can extend Social Security into the next century and expand benefits. It's big money. If you were to keep, I do a lot of this because I read charts all the time and I know it's meaningless, but like there's a million different, there's actually an infinite amount of options of how you do it. So like if the curve is called the replacement rate and it's really steep at the bottom. So for low income people, it's really steep like that. And the more wages you earn, the softer the curve gets. So it's replacing less and less of your income as you go. And so that's a variable as well. Like, do you just keep this where we are, or do you flatten it more? So Nancy, I'm not trying to dodge. I'm trying to say that when you look at it as a policy concept, the cap, there already are a whole bunch of variables that are dials in policy terms that you would be adjusting in a bunch of ways. So I think the right way to think about it, so basically you could design a raising the cap that would, raise the solvency date by like 1 year if it was a really dumbly designed one, or all the way up to what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren did, which is literally beautiful policy. I know I'm a huge nerd for saying it, but like this was they squared the circle with this one. This was really impressive to get 75 years solvency plus that $200 benefit increase across the board and the targeted increases. So I would, if you're interested in the tax side policy, I'd start there. But it's not the only one. Ron Wyden also has a really fascinating bill. Got a great name too. I can almost remember it off the top of my head. It's like treat something as, or treat all income equally act, something like that. And it takes all the capital gains and it just dedicates it to Social Security. So without touching the cap, but just going after cap gains at a rate that's reasonable, and dedicating it to Social Security, it adds decades and decades and decades to solvency, right? So there's also not only one answer. Sorry, that was also a long one.
That's okay. Tara, you're up next.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So Alex, as a talking point, I know this is not real, but if regular people need to take a 25% hit on their Social Security, how can we basically say, well, if we take a 25% hit, then you, the ultra rich or the top 10% or whatever the numbers work out to, you should also take a 25% hit. How does that have any legs at all? Does that have any?
So the
ability to move the conversation?
I think the key, and we have some great polling on it as well. People are really into taxing rich people. Just like there was this defensive crouch that happened in what I call the overreaction to Reagan era, when the Democrats like rushed to be as Republican as possible. And it didn't work for them, right? Like they lost, you know, I have all sorts of opinions on, in this area. We could have a whole nother discussion. But so the real thing is not to talk about on the benefit side. It's to say millionaires and billionaires need to pay the same rate as the rest of us into Social Security. Super popular. Everyone agrees with it. So like you don't shy away from the revenue side one. And then extraordinarily popular is saying the ultra wealthy should pay their fair share into Social Security. And we know what that means. It's the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. So it's not like a talking point. The ultra wealthy should pay their share into Social Security. And they don't want to. So because they don't want to pay their taxes, they're trying to steal 20% of our Social Security benefits, right? That's the dichotomy that I think you want to set up, is that rich people don't want to pay their taxes because they're cheats. And then what they're doing is they're trying to steal working people's money, working people who played by the rules, right? They're the ones who paid in. We're the ones who pay into the system. It's our money. And these billionaires, because they don't want to pay their taxes, they're trying to steal our money. So basically the short answer, Terry, is like the key is not to talk about it on the benefit side when it comes to the ultra wealthy. It's the revenue side where they're cheating. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. Thank you.
And I do like, and I don't know everyone's sort of flavor of ideology here. So sorry if I offend when I say, but like the more establishment-y democratic reluctance to talk about taxing rich people is changing, but there's still it's still sort of in the political. There's a lot of Democratic politicians who are extremely old and really came up in that overreaction to Reagan era. Elected Democrats who are very old is what I mean. And so they're really coming at it with these very 1990s ideas that like the American people don't want to raise taxes on the wealthy. Not at all true. The American people are really into raising taxes on the wealthy. And then there's this other polling result that's also fascinating, although it makes perfect sense. And we never focus grouped it, but I'm guessing here. But if you take a tax and you tax it, generally taxes are not that popular. So if you just like name a tax, but if you dedicate it to Social Security, it goes up massively in popularity because people so like it's not that people don't like paying taxes or they don't like taxes. They don't like taxes that go to buy like a useless military jet, or that is going to buy somebody's cousin a new car, right? Like they don't like corruption and all of the other things, but they do love their Social Security. So if you're like, oh, and then we're going to use this estate tax to pay for Social Security, people are like, yes, that's a great idea. So just in terms of talking about it, I would not shy away from the tax, and then also know that dedicating it to Social Security makes any tax much more popular.
Well, good segue into these ideas of what people can do.
Perfect. Is this on my screen? Yes, there we go.
Yes, and also I want to thank Mr. Lawson so very, very much for coming and speaking with us this afternoon.
And if I can do one, because these are great 4 steps right here. Love all of these steps. If you can, if you have a sort of record of that number 4, contacting your Congress people, that is really important right now. And also getting onto social media around the White House and just demanding a clean debt ceiling raise with whatever sort of messaging you like. But I think don't negotiate with hostage takers is a very strong one that makes a lot of sense. But it really is this week. So if you got some energy to do something, phone calls and emails into electeds in DC, now is the time.
Thank you again, Mr. Lawson.
Hey, Janet, this is Terry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Do you want to go back for just a second? I know we're in the last couple of minutes, but I think it's worth noting that, go back one slide,
Will it
the
go
other
back?
direction. Yeah. One more. So I just want to call these out. I want people to actually hear these. So register and vote in US elections. I know that's stating the obvious, but, and probably if you're on this call, you already do that. But if you don't, if you could do that, sorry, go back to the,
Sorry. Sorry.
if you don't, we can help you vote from abroad. That's why we're here. The second thing is join Democrats Abroad. This is what we do. These are the kinds of things that we do to keep moving in the right direction. So one of the key things for especially chapters like Chapala, but all the 8 chapters throughout Mexico, is these are the kinds of things we want to support and bring to you, Social Security advocacy work. So to do that, we need your help to both join and also volunteer and donate. And then this one's really important, I think, although probably less so this week than number 4 that Alex just mentioned, but go ahead and join Social Security Works. And you see and Colleen will put that in the chat. You can see
Sorry.
it's pretty straightforward.
SocialSecurityWorks.org.
Right.
No dot after that work.
No, that's just in the sentence, sorry.
Thanks.
And we already talked about number 4. So moving on, next slide.
Okay. So Janet, you want to talk about these?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to thank Mr. Lawson so very, very much for speaking with us this afternoon. And
Thank you all.
thank you. And the way you join our chapter, you can email with the subject line join and send your email to dalakechapala@gmail.com.
And if you need to join a chapter other than ours, we will forward your request to the appropriate chapter.
Of course.
You'll need to put in where you live.
And if you are interested in volunteering or donating to DA Lake Chapala, you can email volunteer or donate to that same address. And I wanted to mention that one of our sister chapters is holding a Medicare portability event next month. They're doing a Zoom on that on Monday, June 12th from 6 to 7:30 in the evening. That's Mexico City time. And it's going to concentrate on how Democrats abroad are working to make Medicare work for us outside of the United States and here in Mexico. That's a big, big, big issue that, again, we have paid into the system. We want the benefits. And thanks again to everyone who logged on this afternoon, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Janet. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Janet.
Bye,
Fabulous
Terry.
job.
Nancy, Elizabeth, Barley.
Great program.
Alex already